Thank you all for coming, and we didn't realize there's Zumba next door, but this has happened before, we forgot. But if it's a problem, you can't hear us, just tell us and we'll talk a little louder.
Some nice background music.
Yes. My name is Beth O'Connor.
And my name is Libby Longley.
And we're the literacy specialists here at HOD. And I've been here about 8 years, and you joined us.
This is my 5th year here.
Yep. And before that, I worked at Freeman Centennial for 8 years. So it was a nice switch to come down and work with the younger students. We want to thank you all for coming. We really appreciate you being here. And we called our presentation Celebrating Family Read-Alouds because we really want to have our goal be tonight a celebration, not shaming or blaming or judging if you don't read aloud every night. It's nothing like that. We just want we want to share some ideas with you about this wonderful activity.
Before we get to the whole piece, we thought it would be helpful if we talked a little bit about what we do here at school. So these are some of the components of our literacy program here, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. So we have Readers Workshop, Writers Workshop, Word Work and Phonics, and then of course, Read-Alouds. For Readers and Writers Workshop, we use the Lucy Hawkins Units of Study for Teaching Reading, based out of New York. For our Word Work and Phonics, we use a program called Foundations, which is based on another program called Wilson. What's great about the Lucy units is they come with a lot of mentor texts, and these are some examples of some first grade read-alouds that are in the program. So you can see they have fiction, they have nonfiction, there's a wide variety of choices.
And if you have questions as we go along, feel free just to ask.
So in terms of Readers Workshop and Writers Workshop, this is what it looks like every day. So it starts with a group lesson. It's called a mini lesson. And usually the teacher will, teach one strategy, just a quick exposure to something. And then she'll send the students off to either write, or read. So the goal is really to give the students as much time to practice reading, writing authentically, just reading and writing. While students are reading or writing independently, the teacher will either meet with students individually to have little conferences, or pull a small group to do something called guided reading or a strategy group. And that's what the teacher does while the students are independently reading. And then at the end, of course, time is always the enemy, and a lot of times teachers run out of time, but the goal is to have a share where everyone comes back together and you can share something that went really well, something you noticed. So that's how the workshop model works. This is a cute little graphic that some teachers have in their classrooms just to show. It's a pie chart, so the mini lesson is this much time, and then you can see the majority of the time is hopefully spent where students are independently reading or writing, and teachers are putting small groups. Another thing that we wanted to talk about today is some of the other initiatives and different things that we've tried here to really boost the reading and writing in the last few years. So we are so fortunate to have the support of our administration, and they realize how important books and they promote literacy nonstop. So we're so fortunate. So we have a book room in the library, which I know some of you volunteer in the library, you might have seen it. It's kind of in the far corner of the library, where teachers can pull books for guided reading. And I mean, there are just thousands of dollars worth of books, which we are so lucky to have. And we've really worked hard in the last few years to build up that book room. Another thing that I'm sure you're all familiar with are these take-home book bags. So in the last, I feel like this may be our second or third year, where every student has a book bag where they take home books that they can read independently on their own, which is awesome. Because that was always something that came up in the years prior to that, especially in kindergarten and first grade. It's really hard to walk into a bookstore or even into the library and find books that your kindergartner or first grader can read. So these book bags have been huge just in the last couple of years. This book, It's All About the Books, that's a professional book that a lot of our teachers are using. Beth and I are reading an after-school with the Classroom Library Revitalization Project, which we affectionately call CLRP. So we've been doing that to try to really help with the classroom libraries and organizing those in different ways to make them more appealing and things like that. So that's what's been going on at school. And when we were making this presentation, we really relied on this. We found this one article that was kind of perfect. It perfectly matched what our goal was for tonight. And the opening, the introduction to it was all about keystone habits. So how it says, what are keystone habits? So they're an elite category of habits that kick off a chain reaction influencing several areas of your life at once. So in other words, you can focus on just one keystone habit and you'll experience several positive impacts. So I'm sure you can all guess what the keystone habit is that we're going to talk about tonight.
We're just wondering if Doria has a microphone. Would you like us to use the microphone, or can you hear us? Yes, use the microphone? Okay.
Okay. I'll try to be a little louder too. She's ready. So yes, the keystone habit for tonight is Alouds with kids. So you can read that. It's free, takes 10 to 15 minutes a day. Anyone can do it. And all you have to do is this, read to your child. Even if they already know how to read themselves. Because research shows that reading aloud is a powerful keystone habit that will raise smart, kind kids, which when we think about it, that's really our goal, is to raise smart, kind kids. These are, here's the chain reaction of what reading aloud can do. So your child will hear a wide variety of words. You grow your child's brain. You put him or her on the path to be a lifelong reader. Your child's behavior will improve. You build a stronger bond with your child, and you increase your child's capacity for empathy. So this is a quote from Jim Trelease, who actually, he's a parent. He's from Western Massachusetts, and he wrote this book called The Read Aloud Handbook, and it was all about his experience reading aloud to his own children and all of the effects that he noticed after reading aloud. So this is the first of the chain reactions for reading aloud. So a wider variety of words. Sorry, I lost my train of thought here. So Jim Trelease wrote the Read Aloud Handbook, and this is a quote from him, and it's all about how the vocabulary that students come into kindergarten with really sets them up for so much success, and the foundation that you lay as parents between birth and 5 years just really does so much. And when we were researching, this organization kept popping up called Reach Out and Read, and it's set in inner cities, and they're really trying to bridge the gap with the vocabulary gap. And the number one thing that they have on their website and with their organization is that they encourage parents to read aloud daily to their infants, toddlers, and preschoolers as a simple and effective way of fostering, nurturing, language-rich family interactions. So really, it's just so important with their vocabulary. Another example of how they hear a wide variety of words is, and I have these books because I realize you can't really see it. So this is an example of something that a late kindergartner or early first grader might read. And you can see it's very basic. I see a box, I am going to make a car. Obviously the language is so simple. And then this is an example of first grade read aloud. And you can just see the difference in the vocabulary and the words. Another piece of the chain reaction here is that you grow your child's brain. Yeah, this is no. So you grow your child's brain. This is where it got kind of scientific, but there was a study done at Cincinnati Children's Hospital,
and they had children listen to a pre-recorded story, and they noticed that the left side of the brain was much more active, and the more you read to the child, the more you help the neurons in this region grow and connect in a way that will benefit the child in the future in reading. And that's what came up over and over again with the Read Aloud, is it was all about the connections in the brain that really helped when people were reading aloud to their children. Another example is that you put him or her on a path to be a lifelong reader. So really, and I'm sure you all experience this, it's such a positive interaction, I would assume most of the time. When you're reading with your child, there's a sense of closeness, and if you have those positive experiences, if those are their memories from when they're little, then that will set them on the path to be a lifelong reader. Your child's behavior will improve. This was honestly one that I hadn't really thought about, and I thought it was kind of interesting. So this was a study that was done at New York University, and I think this was actually through the program that I mentioned earlier, the Reach Out and Read program, where they staged an intervention with parents to have them read aloud and play, and it helped their social and emotional development. And they had 675 families, and they did this intervention with 225 families, and they found this. So it really affected the aggression, hyperactivity, difficulty with attention, and we know that all of those things make it hard for students to succeed in schools. So all of these things were affected just by simply reading aloud. And I think the second quote really struck me too, because I know you've all read stories where it really talks about feelings and how people feel, and the more you read aloud to children, the more they're able to control their behavior when they have challenging feelings and identify those feelings that they're having. You build a stronger bond with your child, which again, I'm sure you've all experienced this. And we see that, and we talk about this all the time, especially in our job, because we're so focused on benchmarks and levels and making them be successful and making them be readers, when really our real goal is for them to love it and to really enjoy it. And I think this first quote is that sometimes we forget that people have been telling stories, reading stories really since the beginning of time. It's part of relationships. You pass down stories, you tell stories. You increase your child's capacity for empathy, which is another interesting factor that maybe some people don't always think about. So there's this whole idea of theory of mind, which is your way to think of mental states and being able to basically put yourself in other people's shoes and understand that people may feel differently than you do. And this really comes true because when you're reading stories, you're putting yourself in characters' shoes, you're thinking about how they're feeling, how you might feel, and this all comes just through reading aloud with your children. And this just repeats some of that. So your brain is literally living vicariously through the characters at a neurobiological level, which is just crazy to think about, but that's what research is showing, that that's really happening. And I found this last quote to be pretty interesting too, that if you have a child reading a fictional story about honesty, that child will then, when presented with a difficult situation, be more likely to act in an honest way, which is pretty interesting.
So Libby had the hard part. She had to do all the research part. I'm just doing the tips for helping you work read alouds into your lives. So thank you for me. Oh yeah, how do you do this? All right, I might need I'm going to use okay, so why is it so hard? We know it's a great activity to do, but why is it so tricky to find the time to do it regularly? And the reason is that life is crazy. All these things are making demands on us, and And I think the woman who wrote the article that Libby talked about first said it best. As parents, the demands on our time are endless. We have laundry to fold, sibling battles to mediate, healthy dinners to prepare. Our kids need help with homework, the car is due for an oil change, and it's our turn to bring snacks after the t-ball game. We need to make doctor appointments, deposit a check at the bank, and sew that seam that ripped in our best work pants. On and on and on. So I'm sure if we went around the room, we could come up with 100 different reasons why it is so hard to fit reading aloud for those 15 minutes into our daily schedules. We're busy people. But I did read one study that said when you are busy, you tend to prioritize things backwards. You prioritize the things of less importance than the things that are the most important. So that busyness factor is working against us because instead of taking a step back and reflecting and saying, all right, I'm going to make the time to do this, we're just so busy we just do whatever comes first. So we're hoping that tonight you'll get some, maybe a little motivation or hear some tips that will help you prioritize family read-alouds. And these were the top reasons why people don't read aloud every day. We're too busy, our kids can read on their own, I just don't like reading aloud, my child can't sit for that long, I'm tired, our kids are all different ages, my child interrupts me on every page, and if I have to read that story one more time, I think I'm good to go. Raise your hand if you've had that experience, where you have to read that same book over and over again. So we're just going to go through some tips of helping you with each of these little reasons why it's hard. So the first one, if you feel like you're too busy, there were 3 suggestions that I really liked. The first one was bundling your read aloud with another activity that you have to do every night. So your kids brush their teeth every night. So if you think of it as a twofer, well, you're only going to brush your teeth after we read aloud for 15 minutes, then that might help you make that happen. The other ideas they had were giving yourself a visual. So if you have a read aloud book basket where you can put things in, your kids can put things in, that's going to be a visual reminder to you, oh yeah, you got to read aloud. This is like, there are a lot of authors keep to-be-read piles, or readers keep to-be-read piles, so this would be considered your family to-read pile, so that it's always changing and always interesting. The next idea they had was tracking it, which everybody, there's one of these on your tables. This is going to go home tomorrow with your child in their backpack, and this is our initiative for this year. It's the Family Read Aloud Challenge. I think you might have gotten a letter and email about it, so I think you know about this. But even just this visual, if you hang this on your refrigerator and have your child color in each day that you read aloud, just as a helpful reminder, we're hoping that this is going to help you kickstart your habit to be reading aloud, and we're hoping maybe the kids give you pressure too to fill this in. So, all right, the second one was that children sometimes, we think once our kids can read, we think, oh, we don't have to read aloud to them anymore, they can do it on their own, they need to practice their own reading. But we have found that it's so important to read to children of all ages. So Donalyn Miller is a very famous writer and teacher who's she's written Reading in the Wild and The Book Whisperer, all about teaching reading, and she says we do not age out of read-alouds. If we did, the audiobook industry would not be thriving. Do any families here use audiobooks? Do you listen to audiobooks in the car when you're taking trips, or you yourself? Yeah. So if you don't read aloud because your child can read on his or her own, we're asking you to please reconsider the benefits. The study that I saw said that reading aloud in most families peaks at age 5. And then while a majority of families read about 5 to 7 days a week before a child enters kindergarten, only 17% of parents of kids ages 9 to 11 read aloud to their children. And after hearing all that great research that Libby found, now you're thinking, oh my gosh, no, we can't stop at when they're 5. We should really have it keep going. So the thing about reading with older kids is that it's a great way, could you just come up and take it? Whoa. It's a great way to discuss life lessons and difficult issues sometimes books can touch upon things, bullying or even death or divorce that might be hard to talk about, but you can read it in a book and then talk about it with your child. So that's one great reason to read to older kids. And also, as Libby said earlier, kids can understand, until 8th grade, their listening comprehension is much greater than their reading comprehension. So they can listen to and read books that might be a little more complicated that they can't read themselves. They can understand it, but they wouldn't be able to read it or access it themselves. So you always have books that you can read that are above their actual reading level, but that will be interesting and accessible to them if you read them. So if you have gotten out of the habit of reading to older kids, these are just 4 quick little ones. Nothing, not brain science, but getting back into the habit of asking your children what they're reading and then maybe taking turns doing like a seesaw read back and forth. Choosing a family reader aloud that everybody reads from. And then maybe even changing up the genre, finding articles, newspapers, and even short stories, poems that you can read with older kids. Oh, all right, so one excuse was people were saying, I'm not a children's librarian, I can't do all the voices, I kind of stink at reading aloud, but the thing is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how well you do it, the effort you put in is still going to make that time worthwhile for you and your child. Some ideas if you don't really like to read aloud, try reading a different genre until you do find one that you enjoy reading, or just in your head, instead of thinking about it as reading aloud, thinking about it as together time, so that it's just that beautiful bond that you're developing with your child over reading books. Oh, okay, so this is a good one. If you're worried that your child can't sit still, you should read to them because this is why. It will help them be able to learn how to sit still, because listening is something that you learn how to do. It's not something that is just innate. So especially with active kids, you should practice with them at home so that they can learn how to be good listeners, and that will increase your child's ability to pay attention and concentrate, which we at school would really appreciate. So there are books that you can read with kids that actually are active, so that they require action while you're reading them, so there are those that you could look into. And also if your kids move around, that's fine. Maybe you want them to be walking back and forth as you're reading, maybe you want to give them something. I know at Freeman, the kids always used to doodle when we were reading aloud to them, and we had a big conversation, well, should they be doodling? But they were listening, they just needed to be moving while they were listening. And asking your child questions, make it more interactive so that even your active kids can be participating in the read aloud. She gave other examples too. Read to them when they're in the bathtub, read to them during a snack. Always let them choose the books, maybe you'd get more buy-in that way. And then, I don't know how many people feel comfortable doing this, but you can take your child to the park. Put them in a swing and read to them then. Sometimes we're just too tired to read aloud. So if the bedtime, I know like after 10 years of being married, after 10 years I realized I couldn't bake at night. I was too tired to bake, and every time I tried to bake something at night, it was awful and it got burned. So I just know I never might bake at night anymore. If you can't read at night, just switch it up and choose a different time of day. Maybe you want to read during breakfast, maybe you want to read during snack time or bath time. And then if you're still having trouble staying awake during the read aloud, try to choose some books that you remember reading when you were little that will hold your interest. Just a couple of ideas there. Okay, some people don't like to read aloud because they are being constantly interrupted by their child. But actually that's a good thing, because your child is engaging in the text. So if they're asking questions all the time about the story, that's really a good thing, because they are trying to make meaning from what they're seeing on the page. And asking questions is actually a strategy that we teach kids to deepen their comprehension. And then, as I said before, some of the best conversations actually come from the questions about their characters, how the character reacted to a certain situation, and different events that take place in the book. And if the questions are totally off topic about different things that are happening or popping into their brains, just say, and we say this in our classrooms too, we can talk about that later. Right now, we're going to continue reading the book, but save that thought, and we'll talk about that when we finish reading the book. Oh, if you're struggling because your child asks for the same book over and over, I love this, she says, get rid of it, hide it. She said, if you're hating the experience of reading the book aloud, or if you don't like that book so much that it's going to make you not read aloud, that book can get conveniently lost for a little while, is what she seemed to suggest. But if there is a book that your child likes to read, set limits. And you can say, sorry, we've read that book twice today, that it's over till tomorrow, choose a different book, but it's okay to set limits with those books. And also, you can visit the library to always have fresh new ideas and new books, so maybe they would lose interest in that same old favorite that you have to read over and over again. Some people find it difficult to read aloud because their children are all different ages. That's not a problem. You'll be surprised how many older children love picture books. And we actually used picture books as mentor texts, and kids, there are so many picture books that cover deeper topics with deeper comprehension. Picture books aren't just for little kids, so I like that first bullet, children are never too old to enjoy picture books. And there are also many chapter books that appeal to all ages, and there's always the idea of if your younger kids are napping, you can try reading with your older kids at that time or when they're asleep. And then there are just some other tips. One is to carry books with you everywhere. So you never want to be caught in a waiting room or at a soccer practice just sitting there. If you had a book, that's a perfect opportunity to take it out and read with your child. Audiobooks are another option that for long car rides. I know the library has a huge collection of audiobooks. And there's so many ideas for read-alouds online from your local librarian, Courtney, and that read-aloud handbook is chock full of great ideas about what to read.
So we wanted to, it's kind of like the elephant in the room, we wanted to talk about technology because obviously it's a huge part of our life now. So we found this study which was kind of interesting. They had kids read books in 3 different ways. So the first way was that they only heard the book. The second way, the animation condition, was a screen with animation in the story. And then the third way was the illustration condition, which was a typical storybook, picture book. And what they found, and I have Goldilocks and the 3 bears here because it was like too hot, too cold, just right. So the first 2 were too hot and too cold. They noticed that and again, this was a brain study, they were noticing that there was action in the brain, but there weren't really a lot of connections. And it was the illustration condition, the picture book with the words, that was the one that was just right. So that was the one where the children's brains were making connections among the different regions, which is really what we're hoping for. And then they also pointed out that it actually would have been even better. Obviously this was done in an MRI machine, so it wasn't done in the coziness of mom or dad's lap. So it would have been even better if it had that closeness to it. In terms of the animation condition, we just thought that these 2 points were interesting. And the other thing that was interesting is that they found that the children's comprehension was the worst with this form of the story. They said it was just too much for the child to keep up with in terms of understanding. And again, there was a lot of action, but it wasn't, the children weren't really connecting what was happening. And the author of the study did say kids exposed to too much animation are at risk for not developing that integration, those connections that they need to be successful.
So this is our last slide before Courtney's just going to speak. But if we wanted to, we could have done a whole other talk about screen time and technology, and that would have been a whole other day. But we did just want to leave you with one thought about technology, and it's this. This is from Jim Trelease from that Read Aloud handbook. There is evidence that we don't remember information as well when we read it on a screen. Yet people are on screens all the time. We're raising the most distracted generation in the history of the world. The more distractions you add to the agenda, the less well you think. Technology may save space, weight, and time, but there's no science showing that it will save children's minds, especially if they spend all their time on screen and never open a book. So parents have to play a big role. It's up to parents to limit screen time and to keep reading to kids and to continue to plant and encourage their interest in books and reading. So that's our invitation to you to keep working on that. I have 2 kids. One I did okay with, the other one is addicted to her phone, I have to say. So we're still working on that. But it's tricky. It's very hard with all the competition you have with your phone and your tablet and your iPad. But if you could just keep reading those books, we think that would be the best thing you could do for your children. Does anyone have any questions before we hand it over to Courtney? All right, great.
Thank you. Whoops. Don't drop it. Hi everyone, my name is Courtney. I am the Youth Services Librarian down at Norfolk Public Library. Down there. Yep, that way. You might remember Marissa. I took over for her last May. She is very happily living in Duxbury and having a great time being a children's librarian. But I'm just kind of here to piggyback on what they were saying about reading to your children. I'll start with a few quick, obvious facts. Libraries have books. They are free. So anyone with a library card from any town, just come on down, fill out applications, all it takes. And then you have access to thousands and thousands of books. We have really wonderful collections. We have a really great, easy nonfiction collection, which has a lot of picture book, factual books. So you can read about Amelia Earhart in the form of a picture book story, which is a really great way to introduce your kids to more complex ideas. We have themed collections, so something like friendship is highlighted in these themes, or families. If you're trying to potty train, we have potty training books for your younger kids. And we even have more complicated ideas like bullying or hitting, or maybe like a family death kind of thing, which is a really important way to, it's hard to talk about, so you can read it in a book. And then we have just the regular old awesome picture books, just that you're used to in the wonderful big picture book room that we have at the library. Having a library card is also a really great way to introduce responsibility to your child. They pick out 5 picture books and they take them home. You have to return 5 picture books on time in a good condition. Otherwise, you get a fine, and maybe you can't, you have to do some chores to work off those fines or something like that. So that's a really great way to introduce a little more responsibility if you're looking for something like that. Let's see what else. One of the biggest things I can say is, just to piggyback off of that they were saying a little bit more, is don't be afraid to read to your children. In terms of the voices, I can't do voices either. I can't do them. I get really loud and big, but I can't do the voices, so don't worry about that. It's a really great bonding experience for your child, and regardless of the age, I love being read to now. It's great. And they do understand, they understand at a higher comprehension level you reading to them rather than reading themselves. So they might be able to read a picture book, but maybe you could read the first book in Harry Potter to them, and they would love it. Do it chapter by chapter a night, and it would be such an interesting idea. And don't be afraid to ask them questions. They say, well, why did the big fat wolf throw down that house? Well, why do you think they did that? Or how many pigs do you see on this page? Or something like that, and get them involved and interested, and that will kind of increase their comprehension a little bit more than if they were just passively listening. Just a little plug for summer reading, which is coming up, believe it or not. We have some flyers on the table over here, along with some of my favorite read aloud books. Most of them are fairly new, which is awesome, but I do have some oldies on the table as well. So there's flyers for the spring and a little preview for the summer. We have quite the program signed up for the summer, so take a look at that. That's all I have. Is that okay? All right, does anybody have any questions for me about libraries or how we can help you more? Because we're here to help. We really are. The whole staff at Norfolk Library is the wonderful people. Yes?
So I noticed that you guys used to have a lot of programs during the day.
Yeah.
But now that I have older kids that are here at HOD, is there any plan to have any events maybe after school or on the weekend?
Yes, we are absolutely working on that too. We've noticed a lapse in that. So probably in the fall, we'll be introducing some more programming for after-school hours. And if anyone has any suggestions of what they'd like to see in the library, we're always welcoming suggestions for that. So that's a great idea. Thank you for bringing that up. Anyone else? All right, great. Well, like I said, we're here to help, so come on down. Everyone is super friendly. I promise we won't bite. All right, thank you.
So I think your children are going to finish in about 5 minutes, so you can get up and walk around, talk to each other. There are snacks over there for the kids. There's some clementines, some trail mix bags, waters if anybody wants one. And if you want to come up and talk to Libby or me, we're available, Courtney too, and check out the books. But again, thank you very, very much for coming, and thank you for all you do with your children.